Welcome to the Veterans Beyond the Wire podcast. I am your host, Tim Keller, along with me, my co-host, Mr. Matthew Disher. How are you, sir?
Doing well. How are you?
I'm doing just fine. We just kind of discussed the weekends are never long enough. We're going to vie for that third day. We need that third day of the weekend to just allow you for that recovery, take that extra deep breath, prepare for the week that's ahead. But we are excited. We're happy to be here. We are both Marine Corps veterans. I had been kicking the idea of doing a veteran-based podcast around for a while. Matt, who does military talent acquisition, is that what
Correct.
it's called?
Yeah, that's right. Corporate military talent acquisition. That's been my career. Yeah.
He has been doing a very similar style show internally for the company he currently works for. And so we kind of got together. We did one of these video streams, video chats, discussed what sort of topics we'd want to talk about, things like that. And it seemed like we were both on the same page. So here we are. We're doing this. It's the first episode. In this episode, we just kind of want to get to have you guys know us a little bit. We kind of want to talk about what our goals are for the show, what our hopes and dreams are for the show, where we'd like to see this thing go. So, Matt, with that being said, let's go over some of the discussion topics. Some of these topics are going to be things we're going to talk with our guests about. And the first question, I think, is the first question we're going to ask most of our guests is why the military? So, Matt, for you, why was the military the option for you? Why did you join?
Geez, I think that there are so many reasons, and of course you've probably fielded this question so many times too, and I know I've answered this question a million times, and I think my answer changes every time I answer it. One time it was because the Marine Corps uniform looked so good, I wanted to wear it, and the other time it's because it's the best. The other time it is, my dad and my brother, my older brother, were both in the Navy. My grandfather was in the Army, and my dad had the utmost respect for Marines. So I think that it is really just a culmination of different things. For me, as an adult now that I think back on my 17, 18-year-old self and making that decision, it is a mixture of those things I just mentioned. Of course, the uniform is the best looking uniform, and we all know it. And there's no denying it.
Slightly biased, but yeah,
right across all the branches, everybody knows that too. I think it is a culmination of all of those things. But largely, like I was a kid who in high school I did okay. I had friends. I had some ideas of what the next step was, but largely when it came down to exploring that next step. And, my mom taught at University of Cincinnati and my dad is in business. I'm like, I have to do something here. I went to show up for a college orientation and I looked around the room and I said, I don't belong here. And it's not because I didn't think I could do it. Obviously I have a bachelor's degree now. I just, I went into that room and said, this isn't what I want to do right now. I want to go do something else. I want to experience something larger. And, listening to my brother's experiences in the Navy, all positive, but they weren't what I wanted out of it. Same with my dad, some pretty cool adventures and things like that. But I knew that I needed for my next step, I needed somebody to whip me into shape. And I knew I was going to get that from the Marine Corps. That's what they promised me. Of all the branches I visited, they asked me these questions and I said, I was an okay student and I want to have something for the rest of my life so nobody can ever tell me I didn't work for something. And they're like, oh, we'll make you work for it. We promise you that. So I think that was what made me join the Marine Corps. But the military in general, I think it's just a family thing. All the men in my family have served for as far back as I can look. And, again, I think about it today. I'm like, if it weren't for the military, if it weren't for the Marine Corps, I don't know where I'd be today. I don't know if I'd probably be a different person. Obviously, my trajectory would have changed.
Absolutely.
But I think it did teach me things that camaraderie, teamwork. Suffer through the hard stuff so everything else is easy. You know what I mean? And I take that into every day of my entire life. So I think that's it for me.
Okay. I know for me, very similar. I did what I needed to do in high school. I was not any sort of dummy. I could pass the classes I needed to pass. But by the time I got to my senior year, I was done with the school side of things. I wanted to move on to something else and start some sort of adult life.
Adulting.
Yeah. And looking back now, I should have just held on for as long as possible and kept adulting at an arm's length. um, but yeah, same deal. I had family members that had been in Air Force, in the Navy. I can't remember anybody close that was in the Army, but I started discussing with my father the potential of me going into the armed services. Obviously, him being the Navy vet, he was pushing hard for the Navy. He wanted me to follow in his footsteps, to the point where he actually called the Navy recruiter to come over to the house and sit down with me. And I listened to all of them. I did take the time to listen them to their pitch and see what they all had to offer. But I'll be honest, it's when I walked in that recruiting office with all the branches in it, and the guy in the Marine Corps office looked up at me, and it seemed like he didn't, not that he didn't care, but he wasn't chasing me down the hall like everybody else was.
Right.
And I'm like, he almost negged me. He let me know, like, you got to want this. I'm not coming after you. You got to come after me. This isn't something that I'm trying to just get anybody and everybody. We need certain people. And really that made me turn back around, and I went into the office and said, hey, my name's Tim. I'm looking to join the armed forces after high school. Just wanted to hear what you guys had to offer. And really, once I saw how he handled himself, how he carried himself, I realized, okay, I don't want to be, nothing against the other services, but I just the way they were all selling, it was used car sales everywhere else, and this guy's over here selling these luxury vehicles. Yeah, you got to be a certain type of clientele. Yeah. And I was like, you know what, this is what I want to be. This is where I need to be. And really, I think same with you. If I would not have done that, God only knows who I'd be, where I'd be, anything like that. But I definitely, it whipped me into shape. It taught me many lessons, and that's really where we want to go next. So what is the best lesson you learned while serving?
Geez. Again, a question that could be answered so many times, but and I think I alluded to this before. It is that, and I had a conversation like this on LinkedIn recently, where somebody asked, what does all the yelling and shouting and distress in Marine Corps boot camp teach you? Like, what's the point of it? And my answer, as I mentioned before, was that, if you can do this hard stuff when the world in front of you is crumbling and falling apart, and it feels like the path ahead is impossible, you can do anything. The night is darkest at the dawn, or so they say. It feels like that at some points in time during sort of that training in the military, where you're just like, man, this is the hardest thing I've ever done. I'm freezing cold. I'm tired. I'm exhausted. I haven't slept in days. And then there's this little glimmer of hope that you're gonna, maybe get to sit down or eat some food, eat some chow. And suddenly everything is like, yeah, you know what? That wasn't so bad. The 3 days of no sleep wasn't so bad. I can do that again. Mm-hmm. I would say that's what I took out of it, almost to a fault. And, now I'm a family man. I'm married. I have a kid. I take those things into my everyday when there is an emergency in my household or a real emergency in real life. I tend to, I don't want to say underreact. I tend to slow down and think and process through the situation while everybody else is in utter chaos. And I take that into my job with me too. Not that my job is utter chaos, but I take that sort of, that attitude, like, we can fix everything. We can make everything better. We can always go forward. We can always move and do better. So, if I had to pick something right off the top of my head, it is that. Aside from that, it's mission accomplishment. I'd say, in the Marine Corps, that's what we always said was number one during any operation, during any training, during any mission. Get the job done, and that's something that I try to teach my 9-year-old son is do it right the first time or don't do it at all. And I think that carries into the work that I do professionally and in my community. When I'm coaching baseball, hey, there's no point in playing if you're just not going to do it 120%. You have to give it everything. You're trying to win here. You're trying to win in the game of life. I know it sounds silly, but that's the Marine Corps taught me, the military taught me that we get the job done. We don't quit. And also that, we're among the best that America has to offer. All of us in the military, all of us, every branch, we're among the best, and we should uphold that image. We should take that into our lives when we go out and hang out with our friends and go to work. You should be prideful that you have that on your resume, that you served in one of these branches, and take that and carry that legacy forward. So, another subject we could talk about out forever. I'm curious to hear what yours was, if it's similar. I think a lot of us share a lot of the same stuff.
My top of the head answer is the ability to, like you said, not underreact, but in a moment of stress, be able to it seems like I just take a deep breath and I become more focused. I start absorbing even more information. My brain starts calculating things at a higher rate than it seems some other people do. And just the ability to not only work, but focus and just be on point during times of pressure is probably the biggest thing I learned while in the military, but also the teamwork, the camaraderie are things that I possibly didn't have such a great hold on before joining the military. And I'm glad I got to experience those things, because I strive to achieve those sort of relationships outside the military. It's very hard to do, obviously, but it's something that is possible, and it's something that I do strive for, especially now. I work closely with my employees, and just when things get bad, when things get rough, like these past few months with the COVID issues, and despite all the health concerns, still having to work on a daily basis, letting these guys know, like, hey, these are the moments, these hard times. Nobody wants to be here nobody wants to go to work on a daily basis to begin with, but especially when there's the potential that you're going to catch a virus that you're going to take home to your family and get everybody else that you love sick. Trying to let these people know these are the moments that are going to bring us closer together, and we're going to see what everybody's actually made of. And there were the few employees that found every which way they could to try to skate out of things. But the majority of the crew came together and were there on a daily basis. And now that we're hopefully starting to come out the other side of it, I truly do believe this brought most of us closer together. I mean, we saw what everybody was made of. And those are the things that I learned from the military, and I take with me on my everyday path.
Yeah.
So obviously, we talked about why the military, things we learned in the military, but for everybody that is in the military at some point, if it's 4 years, if it's 24 years, at some point you have to exit your military life. Some people do a great job of doing this. They have a fantastic exit strategy. Some people have that family business to go home to. Most do not have either one of those. So I know for me, my exit strategy was, well, I'll go home and I'll see what kind of jobs are available. And I was smart enough to save up a little bit of money. I had a couple grand saved up in the bank, but really beyond that, I had no jobs lined up. I had no real contacts back at home for any sort of employment. I was going to go home. I was going to pick up the paper. I was going to go through the classifieds, because that's what we did back then.
Right.
And hope to find a decent job. So what was your exit strategy? Did you have any at all?
No, it's funny. It's funny we talk about this, because, this is my world now. This is the conversation I have 100 times a day in my professional life, and I have for the last 10 years. And I think it's interesting to note as well that we're a couple of old guys. We got out before the technology existed to network.
No ZipRecruiter, no Indeed, no.
there was
LinkedIn.
no LinkedIn. There was
Yeah.
no network. So you really did. You had to connect to, I got recruited, for example, by the California Highway Patrol.
Okay.
And that was one of those things that showed up, I think, maybe in a TAP program or before a TAP program. Whenever I registered for the TAP program, I think, I got a brochure or a package from the California Highway Patrol because it's a huge entity and they hire a lot of military. Naturally, there's a lot of military bases in California. And that's where, I was transitioning out from Okinawa, but my separation station was going to be Camp Pendleton. And so we didn't have the real strong ability to say, all right, well, I'm going to go have conversations with recruiters and hiring managers in corporate America. Being a 22, 23-year-old kid, again, without a bachelor's degree at that time, I didn't know what my options were. I did the same thing. I said, I'm gonna get out of the military and I'm gonna go home and I'll figure it out because I'm a Marine. I got this on my resume. Look, I blew things up in shotguns. Who's not gonna hire me?
Yeah.
No, that's not what happened. I got a couple $1,000s saved up, and that went real fast because I found that the best jobs that I could plug into, which this is kind of what I wanted to plug into anyway. Was in like the restaurant and bar industry, making a couple bucks at night while I was able to go to school and able to kind of put my social life back together a little bit better. And that's, working in the restaurant business. I'll tell you what, if you want to put a social life back together when you get out of the military, that's the place to go. Cause it's everybody else your same age. But, I always like to tell a story, and this is something that it's not really a story. It's more like an anecdote. It's something that I will reference quite a bit when I'm talking to people about leaving the military. And the way that I look at this is that we are all inside of a room or a cage, if you will. And you can see outside of that room, like we're locked in there together. You and we're locked in there together. We had all of our other friends, the guys in the barracks and things like that we were serving with. And we can see the outside world. We can see what our friends and family are doing outside of that room. And then one day that door opens and they push you out that door and they close it behind you and all your friends stay in there. All your culture, everything you knew stays inside of that room, inside of that box. And you find yourself now walking down the sidewalk, surrounded by strangers, surrounded by a different culture. And I say this, anybody coming out of the military knows this as well. In the military, you have a very unique culture, and especially as a kid coming out of high school and going into the military, you don't have any other adult life. So at this point, the military becomes your adult life. Again, whether you spent 4 years or 24 years in the military, all of this culture, all of your friends, everything the way that you do things, the very clothing that you wear stays inside of this room after they let you out of that room and they lock it behind you. And you have to figure it out. And as I mentioned, you can see outside of that room sometimes. You can view what's going on out there, but you're not part of it. And I don't fault the military for this. This isn't a bad thing or a good thing. This is more like just an anecdote to describe exactly what it kind of feels like to get out of the military. And it might change for everybody else, might have a different perspective, but that was my experience. That I had to come home and everybody was welcoming. Hey, thanks for your service. We were hailed as heroes coming home. But that's as far as it goes. Being a hero doesn't land you a job necessarily. Being a hero doesn't earn you any more money, unless of course you're an official hero with, medals and you've been awarded by the president.
Actual hero.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. But, at the time, and as you probably recall, and for several years after we got out, everybody in the military was a hero. We were all coming back, and there were hundreds of thousands of us, leaving the military after this, post 9/11 and post Iraq invasion, world. But we lacked the resources back then. There are just countless resources, and we can talk about this here in a minute, but countless resources compared to what we had back then.
Yes.
So my transition was tough. I had some time coming out and acclimatizing to the way my friends behaved and, meeting new people and dating and having friendships and things like that. It was a little clunky for a few years. I always say it took me years. It took me years to actually come back and be a regular civilian before I actually fit in. And I'd say this might be true of all Marines, maybe true of of anybody who was in maybe a combat arms job in the military. I don't know if you ever really come back as a normal. You don't really come back like everybody else. You're not just one of these Joes walking up and down the street anymore, which is a good thing for us. I think we mentioned before that we took these things into the rest of our lives, that we got out of the Marine Corps. It did. It changed me. My values changed. And some of those things that I take into the rest of my life will never leave me. So kind of a long-winded answer, but there's so much to be said there.
I think you made a good point there. There's always going to be a sliver of something that anybody that hasn't served is never going to. It's like if being in the military was like the only place where you could eat key lime pie. No one else is ever going to know what that tastes like. And we all get to share in that. And that's our special little thing. And you mentioned this earlier again, is when things do get tough, you have that ability to step back and go, is this really that bad? I mean, I've dealt with a lot worse.
Right.
So let's just take a deep breath here, figure this out. Here's plan A. Let's go. Boom. You hit your mission. And guess what? Sometimes plan A is not always going to work. It's the ability to have that plan B and plan C and transition out of those. I think some people that don't have these sort of backgrounds, possibly they might be able to come up with that plan A, but if plan A gets stymied or put on hold, that's when all else fails, and they throw their hands up and I guess I'm done.
I quit.
Yeah. And that never seems to be an option.
No,
for most of us. You kind of hit on a few of these things, but I wanted to talk about the post-military life, some of the hardest things to adapt to, trying to learn how to be a civilian again. Mm-hmm. You mentioned dating, you mentioned building a relationship with friends again, and just kind of, you talked about being in that cage and the door opening and getting kicked out. I want to say that, post high school, early college years, everybody that didn't join the military all was learning how to ride the bike of being an adult, a young adult. So by the time we get pushed out that door, that cage of the military, they're all, they're up riding these 10 speeds, setting records, and you're just on this tricycle trying to figure it all out. And trying to catch up to them and figure it out and not look like a complete fool at times, I think was tough. When you did have questions, you didn't have that person right here to tell you, well, this is what you're going to wear. This is what we're going to eat. This is where we're going to go. And this is exactly what we're going to do. There weren't those answers. So you had to try to figure these all out on your own. Some of us are better than others at that. It's just how can we get everybody up to speed? And I think that's one of our goals here is answer some of these questions for people transitioning out of the military. I know for me, one of the hardest things to do getting out of the military was realizing that not everybody, most people, in fact, don't share these similar experiences that military veterans do. And so they're cut from a different cloth. And for me in the military, it was, if you're not there to do your job, if you're not willing to do your job, you're putting extra stress on everybody else. So everybody every day had to be available and had to do their job because other people relied on you. Getting out in the civilian world, most people don't have that sort of mentality, and that's fine. That's fine. And it took me a while to come to grips with that. It would make me upset when, for instance, if I'm planning my workday on the availability of 15 other individuals and 3 of them decide, well, it's Monday, I don't feel like coming to work, I'm going to call off. Instead of getting grossly upset at these 3 people and let it ruin the rest of my day, it's, well, this is what it is. Let's figure this out and move on. And just being able to have conversations in a civil manner with these individuals the next day when I do see them, and not just try to blow up like it's, hey, you need to be here because everybody else relies on you. It's, hey, if you're not here, you're causing the rest of us to have to do extra work. Production's slowing down. we all actually do rely on you. I need you to know this. You are a vital part of this team, and I need you to be a part of this team. And for some, a team aspect isn't their thing. It's not the foremost thing in their mind. So what did you find was some of the hardest things to transition to in your civilian life?
Yeah, and I'll start by answering something or touching on something that you mentioned. That you mentioned something about we're trying to get up and ride the bike, and everybody else in our age group and our same peer group is already on that 10 speed. I think it is something that needs to be mentioned, and this is a subject that I've taken through my career. Veterans end up, statistically, we make more money than our non-military peers, our non-veteran peers. Statistically, we stay in jobs longer than our non-military peers. There are a lot of statistics that support showing that we are actually better equipped to come into the rest of our lives than if you took a comparison or a sample size of the non-veteran community. The problem is that when we first leave the military, there is this major adjustment period. And again, it's being let out of that room and having very little knowledge or preparedness for how to have conversations in an interview. In the military, for example, we have you have promotions based on your proficiency in conduct scores and your PT scores and your rifle scores, and then your ability to lead and your ability to do the things that are prescribed to get to that next rank. And in some cases, then you hit certain ranks where there are boards. You have to sit down and talk to multiple people, kind of like in like an interrogation. But those are interviews, and they're high pressure, but they're not interviews like behavioral based questions. You're not going into an interview with the vice president at a Fortune 500 company, and they're asking you questions about what unique knowledge you have about this industry or this job. And so, that's just one example of some of the interesting differences between the military and what we experience out here in the civilian world. The challenges I faced were all in it was putting my life back together and figuring out what the next step is. I think that a lot of people will face the common struggle, the common challenge is something along those lines. How do I start having conversations with the people that I need to be having conversations with, or how do I know who those people are? What resources can I tap into? And this is the problem with the resources. There are so many of them that it's like this convoluted marketplace. There are so many different things that people can plug into that you don't know which one to start. Do I go to the Disabled American Veterans? Do I come over here to the VA? Do I talk to the Wounded Warrior Project? Who am I talking to? I would say that one of the single most valuable pieces of information or resources that somebody can find when they are coming out of the armed forces, so that they don't fall into the steps of people who have previously failed or slow. I don't want to use the word failed necessarily. People who have previously had a pitfall or a rough transition, is to find other people who have already done it and start leaning on them. Start listening to this conversation that we're having, for example. Find a mentor. This is one piece that, man, if I could go back 10, 12 years, I would have found a mentor 12 years ago, not 4 years ago, not 3 years ago. And simply, a mentor is, once you plug into an organization or a company or something, find somebody who has crawled through the dirt, who's chewed on a little bit of dirt for a little while, and say, can I meet with you once a month? I just want to throw stupid questions at you. Stupid questions are like, hey, I don't have a resume. How can I write a resume? I don't know where to go. The VA keeps kicking me around for a disability claim. Any of these things, because there was a period of time where I didn't reach out for any of that help. I didn't ask anybody any questions because I was like, I know it all. I've got this. And I think it's probably what drove me into the career that I'm in, because I felt like I was unable to ask for questions, like I was too prideful to ask questions, and I didn't want to ask for answers. And like I said, it took me a few years to really get on track, and I would go backwards in time and tap myself on the shoulder and be like, hey man, you've got some other people that have done this before. My brother included was 2 years ahead of me out of the military. He got out of the Navy 2 years before I got out of the Marines. There were all these resources. A lot of resources were put in place by the Vietnam Veterans of America and organizations like that, who themselves were not welcomed home in the generation previous to ours. If it weren't for them, a lot of the legislation wouldn't have been passed to get us where we go, where the resources are that we have. So, there are a number of things on the subject, but that's the nuts and bolts of, if I could do something differently, it would have been to go back and find these different resources and start tapping people for help. And I encourage anybody coming out at this juncture to do the same thing and do it early. Do it as soon as they can.
Well, I think that's one of our goals of this podcast, is to hopefully become one of those, maybe not the source, but access to those sources, highlight some of those sources, because you've brought it up multiple times now. When we got out, there wasn't a ton of sources at all. At least, right there at our fingertips. Like right now, everybody has a smartphone. There's, a million different job seeking apps. There's templates on the internet on how to build a resume. You can search up anything you want on Google and find certain veterans resources, military resources, things of that nature. So maybe, based off, like you said, the market's now flooded with those sort of things.
Right.
So hopefully, at least in my mind, my eyes, that this podcast can become a way to consolidate most of that, bring the best of those sources and the best of that information together, highlight some of those things, and people that are transitioning out of the military or have been out of the military now for a handful of years and maybe still feel like they're a little stuck in that quicksand. A way to help you, that vine falls down and there you go. You can pull yourself up out of that quicksand and get moving again.
Right.
We want to kind of be that vine. We want to give you. Go ahead.
It's you have a lot of official sources out there. So when people are leaving the armed forces, as you went through the TAP program, transition assistance programs. There's a lot of official, hey, do this. This is an official resource, an official this, an official that. The official resources don't talk about the emotional challenges of coming out of the military, which is the other topic that we probably aim to cover here. It's beyond the resume writing and finding a job and connecting back to your friends and paying the rent and stuff like that. It is the emotional toll of, again, being let out of that room. It's the emotional toll of the whole title of the podcast, Beyond the Wire. It's the emotional toll of what happens when I leave this zone of, I don't want to call it safety, because we weren't always in safety in the military either, but this familiar network. Right. Yeah. And so I think that's the huge piece that's missing is in all these conversations, and this is what you get from a mentor. This is what you get from some of these other resources beyond the official, do this, do that, don't do this, do that. It is simply hearing it from other people that have done it. Avoiding, again, you mentioned pitfalls, the word pitfall, avoiding the pitfalls, avoiding the common struggles that probably tens of thousands of or hundreds of thousands of us have gone through to get where we are now. If I could make it a little bit easier for you, or, at the end of the day, maybe help somebody, save somebody a little bit of grief, for those transitioning out after some hardship, or after enduring some hardship, you don't need to go, trudging down this path of several years of trying to figure it out. Let's make it easy. Let's give you the answers to the test. So it's, there's a lot to offer there, and just in conversation, there's a lot to be talked about.
Yeah. And that kind of hits on the next little topic I wanted to discuss. And that's, you mentioned being able to go back to, 12 years ago and tap a younger Mr. Disher on the shoulder and say, hey, look at this guy over here. He's already done this. Why don't we just go talk to him? Why don't we go have a conversation? Ask the question. Do you have any other, if you had maybe one or two other big tips that you could give to somebody maybe in that spot 10 years ago, Matt Disher, somebody that's in those shoes right now, if you had one or two other tips for that individual, what would you say?
Geez, first I'd say, wow, you're very handsome, Mr. Disher.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Congratulations on your genes.
Yeah.
I would, geez, this could go any different direction, but I would tell myself to go find some financial acumen courses. It took me a while, and I think that anybody can say this. In my career, I make more money and more money as I go. There was a period of time where I didn't largely understand how money worked until I read a book called Rich Dad Poor Dad, and it taught me a lot. It opened my eyes. Not that it really taught me much as it just opened my eyes, and I became familiar with some things that I probably should have been familiar with. But I'd say in the military, I didn't have exposure to that. It was, we got paid, and I put a little bit of money into savings and walked out of the military with a little bit of cash in the bank. But for the most part, nobody ever, the military didn't teach me how to budget and how to pay the bills. So financial acumen. But aside from that, I think the other piece of this is beyond the classes and the courses we can take and the things that we can learn. It really is, and I mentioned this before, like finding a mentor, finding some people or a network to lean on, a professional network, not getting in with the gang who's going to drink beer till 2:00 in the morning. Commonly, I see this a lot. I see people that come out of the military, especially if they're single, they don't have a family. They are struggling to put back together their social life, which, for a lot of us, that's what we want. We want to have a circle of friends. And so they go down this road where they get involved with those people who might not be, I don't want to say unsavory, but you might not have anything in common with those people. And your desire to fit in then becomes, well, I'm going to go down this road with these people. And you lose track of maybe some of the things you learned in the military along the way. So many different things there, but I would say that I would have gotten a jump start on my education. I would have gotten a jump start on my career. By that definition, I went to college, had a good college experience, but I was a commuter student, and I took my time doing it. It took me, years longer than it takes most average students to get their bachelor's degree done. And that's largely because I was doing 2 classes here and 2 classes there, and trying to work and trying to juggle all these things. And then I got married and had a kid and was still, doing the college thing. I didn't listen to my mom. And she told me when I got out of the military, she's like, I really wish you would go have that college experience, go to one of these universities and get out of the city and go away. Not that she wanted me to go away. I was already gone for 4 years, but I think she was afraid that I would step back into this, hometown sort of thing, like just come back home, get back with your friends, and become another one of these anonymous people in society. And I think that advice probably came from my dad too, who was in the Navy. And he said, when he got out, he followed some jobs and he moved around a little bit, and his experience was a little bit different. So I went to college locally, started palling around with some of my same old friends. Not that I, didn't do anything right or anything wrong. It was just one of those pieces that I probably could have accelerated my success a little bit faster. I'm in a great spot now. Love everything about my life. I know that this, it sounds kind of textbook cheesy, but it's it's all worked out in the long run. It's gotten me where I need to go. But my advice would again be, seek out those resources for people who are leaving the military, not after you leave, during your transition process, a year before. Start connecting with people. Probably another topic we could cover, but right now the market is also saturated with job seekers, and so that's going to make it even harder for somebody leaving in the current environment to go find somebody. I get buried in LinkedIn messages all day. I can't even keep up with them. Yeah. I have people who check back in with me like, "Hey, did you get my last message?" And I'm like, if I were responding to the LinkedIn messages, I would spend all day on LinkedIn. So it's going to be a little bit harder to make those meaningful connections, but that's what people need to do. They need to start with those connections and start by getting advice and listening to it, following that advice, following that advice early. That's what I didn't do. So yeah, we'd go back, talk to myself 12 years ago, 14 years ago first, hey, handsome, looking good, stay in the gym, save some money, but get your stuff together. That's
yeah.
Get it together quicker.
Yes. Hey, this is all going to work out, but it could work out a lot faster.
Right. Right. You'd have that swimming pool in your backyard by now.
Yeah. I think one of my biggest tips, and it's no sort of regret or anything. I just know that I think most people enjoy the challenge that military life bestows upon you. There's the challenge of boot camp. There's the challenge once you're out of boot camp and you're in your MOS school or you're in the fleet. You mentioned meritorious promotion boards and things like that, trying to find ways to make yourself stand out amongst the crowd. I know for some of us, we really do enjoy those challenges. I think that for most of us that enjoy those challenges, getting out, you'll find that there's plenty of jobs that just won't challenge you. It's the go in, hit the clock. If you're working in a warehouse, packing boxes and packing skids all day, you're doing the same thing over and over and over again. Mm-hmm. That's not going to be what you need. That's not going to be the challenge. It's not going to feed that hunger. You mentioned the California Highway Patrol. Myself, it was the NYPD or the U.S. Marshals.
Yep.
I really, really looked into the NYPD for a little while there. And not that I regret not doing it, but I'll tell you this. When I started to look at that cost of housing up there and realizing I don't know anybody in the greater New York area at this time, I would have to get on a site like Craigslist and find a place that had a room for rent with 5 other young guys in there. And I'm still paying $1,200 a month for a total of 800 square feet in the entire apartment. And there's going to be 5 of us living in this thing. And I was like, I don't want to do this. I think at that time in my life, it would have been exactly, I guess, what I was looking for. It was almost a taste of the barracks life, I think, having that many guys in that tight of an area. But the challenge of attempting to be a police officer in that large of a metropolitan area would have been something I think I honestly would have enjoyed doing. My life would have been completely different. I'm happy with the way things did turn out. But I think my tip would be don't just settle for the first job necessarily. If you desperately need to make money, by all means, go ahead and take that job, packing those boxes. But don't allow that to be the end of your story. Find that challenge, continue to look for those challenges, and continue to challenge yourself, because in boot camp, there's the drill instructors that are there to challenge you on a daily basis. When you're in the fleet, you have your brothers and sisters in arms to, maybe they don't know you're in a competition, but you can challenge yourself on a daily basis against the rest of them. Once you're out, there's really nobody to challenge you. So you mentioned the game of life. It's once you get out saying, okay, I'm going to win this game. I'm going to figure out how to win this game. And there's different levels of winning. We're not all going to create Amazon and be worth billions and billions of dollars.
We can't do that.
I can't think of anything that would compete with Amazon.
You haven't done that yet?
No, sorry. I haven't come up with this multinational, business that
there.
Yeah,
we're almost there.
We're getting there. But yeah, my biggest tip would be, you now have to be your own drill instructor.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have to yell at yourself. You don't have to make yourself do push-ups or pull-ups or any of those things, but just find ways to continue to challenge yourself. Because I know for me, if somebody says I can't, or I bet you can't, watch out, because here we go.
Right.
I'm absolutely going to prove you wrong. So sometimes if nobody's going to say it to me, I needed to be the one that said it to myself. Mm-hmm. So just continue to challenge yourself on a daily basis. And you brought the gym up. I know that for some, staying fit post-military is one of the toughest things. I know the day I got out, when I had my DD 214 in my hand, I told myself, I'm never going to run again.
Never running again.
I will never lace up a pair of shoes with the intention of, I'm now going to go run for 3 miles. Never. No. I'm not doing that. That's ridiculous. I'll tell you what, I wish I would have ran more. I've gone up and down on the scales. The COVID has not been helpful to me, but I do know that that's one of the challenges. I wish I would have pushed myself harder, at least the first few months after I got out, because I was like, man, I really let myself go. I need to do something about this. So, my tip would be continue to challenge yourself on a daily basis.
And I think it's for a lot of people, I have a bunch of friends that got out, and they wanted anonymity. They wanted to just go to work and go to work like everybody else. And I wanted that too. But I also always thought to myself, and this is why I went in the military. One of the other 4,000 reasons that I went in the military in the first place was that I realized I was going to get some amazing skills and experience that I could take into the rest of the world, take out to the rest of my life. And for anybody coming out of the military, they need to recognize that in most cases, they probably have some very unique experience that some employer, some organization, some community is looking for. And that could be a job in law enforcement, as we mentioned. That could be a job in politics. It could be a job in community service, in corporate America, in starting another business like Amazon. There are unique skill sets and experiences that you take out of the military, whether you were taking apart and putting together F-22s or firing artillery guns, or guys like us that were blowing things up and building things and shooting guns. There's something unique there, and it doesn't. You don't have to say, well, I filled sandbags in the military, so I'm going to go fill sandbags out here in the civilian world. That's not it. And you mentioned, NYPD, and you mentioned some of the different law enforcement agencies. There was a time, and it has changed for obvious reasons in the current culture of, the political culture right now in America. But I think even before that, there was a time where when we got out, everybody went into law enforcement. Like all the infantry and combat arms people in the military were trying to get a job as a cop or a federal agent or something like that. Secret Service. I applied for the Secret Service, or started an application for Secret Service. I think I got to the part where it said that basically you could just move around infinitely. And I was like, no, never mind. I'm not doing that anymore. But I think in recent years, I see guys who were infantry squad leaders now who are business directors and vice presidents 2-3 years out of the military. They got a master's degree while they were in. I think that's another piece that's missing. I don't remember ever having access to all the education, to all of the college and stuff like that when I was.
I will tell you, it was available to us. One of my buddies actually, at the time, we're getting done work. We're going back to the barracks, and hey, we're all going to go over here. We're going to play a game of softball tonight, or a couple of us are going over to the gym, and then we're going to go out and have a couple beers, or hey, we're all going out to the beach later. This guy's I got a couple classes. I'm going to go back to the room and study. I'm like, dude, what are you doing school for? You can do school when you're out.
Stayed going to the bar.
Stayed in, became a warrant officer, and ended his career, retired just last year, maybe a year and a half ago at this point, as a warrant officer too. So he was forward thinking like that. So kudos to those that have the access, take advantage of the access, and have that forward thought of, okay, now I'm an enlisted individual. I can take these courses, possibly jump over to the officer side of things, or I can take this degree that I'm going to earn, and I'm going to use that in my next step of life, and that's the post-military career. And like you said, 3 years out of the military, being a VP somewhere or some sort of director of some sort is not unprecedented, but it's a huge step. It's to go from, whatever serial numbers on that weapon, the guy that carries that weapon, to a director of a company in that short of a time span is a very big step.
And gaining that valuable experience, and whether that's a job they stay in forever or not. gaining that valuable experience that will take them to whatever the next level is. It's something I always say. It's not this job you want. It's what comes after this that you want. It's the next step. It's, hop into something, find something that has a future ahead of it. But if you don't like the way that this one pays you, this one right here, right now pays you, and you don't like this job, step into something and go after the next job. But you can't disappear into anonymity. You have to have some preparedness and some experience, like your, the college piece in the military. And you're right. Now that I think about it, it was accessible. I just don't remember ever really understanding how we went about doing that. And there was a period of time when I was with the 1st Marine Division in Camp Pendleton. I don't think we would have had time to do it anyway. Yeah. That might also be an excuse. Kind of like when I say I don't have time to get to the gym. There's time. But we were, I don't know if we're going to do distance courses, while on the range at 29 Palms in the desert for 3 months on end, or, during a deployment or something like that, when who knows what happens by the minute. So, but it is, back to the topic at hand. There are a lot of those resources that people can take advantage of and at least get some of it done. Because that was, as I mentioned before, that was a huge occupier of my time when I left the military, was going to college. And it was probably things that I could have finished while I was still in.
Or at least got that head start, like you mentioned. Right. You said you were taking 2 classes at a time here and there. If you knock 10 credits out over your 4 years, 8 years, 6 years, whatever it is, get that head start. And then instead of it taking you another 4 years after you're out, you're already halfway there. You know? Knock that 4 years down to 2. And you're 2 years ahead of the game, instead of getting out and getting on that tricycle, you're already on maybe, that 6 speed instead of the 10 speed.
BMX bike on the ramp. You're doing ramp.
There you go.
Right yeah. You're not at 30 miles an hour yet, but
you're pulling some wheelies. You got some sweet tricks in your bag. You kind of impress them a little bit.
Right. Yeah.
But so I wanted to kind of wrap this one up. We're using this episode as it's our pilot episode almost, for us to get comfortable doing this with each other. But also, this is kind of what some of the shows are going to be like. We're going to ask these individuals why. I think there's a bunch of different whys out there. So why was the military the option for you? What was being in the military for you like? What was your experience? How was getting out? And let's talk about your path to where you are now. We want to talk to people about the pitfalls, the struggles, what kind of lessons they learned, and pass those on to you, the listener. So hopefully you don't fall in those same pits. You don't have those same struggles. And if you find yourself in those struggles, you can lean on their experiences and hopefully get out of those struggles a little bit quicker. Streamline this process for everybody involved. But Matt, I wanted to ask you, what are your thoughts for the future of the show? Any sort of topics, any sort of goals, guests, etc.?
Yeah, I think you hit on it, Tim. I think that is. I think that the primary function here is that we start talking about. We add some flavor to what the transition could look like and what success looks like. And of course, this conversation this time around was kind of serious. I think that we're probably going to do some storytelling in here, in typical fashion. I think both of us are. Although we don't seem like it at the moment, humorous people. There's going to be some humor here too. In telling those stories and telling war stories maybe sometimes, and having guests on here. We're lining up a few people that either work in the space and or have transitioned out of the military, but down the road having some people that everybody's familiar with too. Some of those popular names in the military community that might be again able to add a little bit of flavor to what all this looks like. This is an industry that spits out 250,000 people a year. 250,000 people a year leave the armed forces. It's the second largest renewable resource of talent, of people beyond college campuses. And probably very fitting and very timely right now with the COVID crisis and maybe some of the lack of jobs on the job market, that a lot of people are probably looking for some more information. Well, man, I thought 6 months ago that I was going to plug into whatever job I wanted, and now those jobs aren't there. Where do I go next? And what does that look like? So covering the topics of, this is unprecedented, but we can get there. We can get there together. Everything's going to be okay. I always wanted somebody to, if I could go back and pat myself on the back,
it's going to be all right.
It's going to be, we're going to be good. We're going to be good. And sometimes it's just having those resources. But I think more than anything, as I mentioned before, there are a lot of official resources, a lot of official, fill this out and go do this. My aim for this would really be the more anecdotal, conversational. This is what works for the people that are on here talking. This is what has worked for us. In many cases, it is uncategorized. You're not going to find it in the directory on Google.
Yeah.
You're just going to hear it straight from the horse's mouth, so to speak. And that's the goal here, is to get us all talking, to get us all into this virtual platform where people can lean on this and listen to it on the way to work or whatever, watch it on their computer
at the gym.
Yeah. And get something out of this, and then come back in 6 months and join us for a conversation, so.
You mentioned earlier, if it's pride, if it's that still too young to realize that, hey, you don't actually know everything. But for whatever reason, not finding it within yourself to have the ability to go ask for help, to go ask for the answer, to go ask just the question. Maybe there's plenty of people out there that are in that same boat that don't want to ask, can't think of the question. Maybe this can be that source that just answers it without it having to be asked.
Right.
Because
that's it.
There's plenty of people out there looking for answers. Sometimes they don't even realize they're looking for the answer.
Right.
And if this can help out anybody in any sort of way, I think we're doing a positive thing. So that's, my major goal is just be able to be a resource to help individuals while in the military, getting out of the military, have been out of the military, help answer a question, help provide a resource of some sort.
Yep.
And things like that. You brought up being humorous. I do enjoy humor. I do enjoy a good joke. You brought up politics earlier, so I'll kind of end this on a funny little political story. So before the military, I grew up the city life. I was a city boy. I got out. I reunited with a high school sweetheart. We moved down. I have a beautiful view of a cornfield directly across from my home now. So I am out in the sticks now. Very small community. A few years ago at the elections, there was a spot for a committee person for the Republican Party. There was nobody's name on the ticket, and I thought, this will be funny. I'll write my name in here. Ha ha ha. Well, about a month and a half later, I received a big manila envelope in the mail from the York County Voters Bureau congratulating me on winning my election.
Oh my gosh. That's crazy.
With a total of 1 vote, I began my political campaign, or my political career. I was the Republican committee person for my district for 4 years. At the time, I had no idea what it even was. I saw it on a ballot and there was no name, so I thought it'd be just hilarious, just absolutely hilarious if I put my name down. So be careful what you do in the polls when you're voting. But yeah, that was interesting. I then started to get in contact with a bunch of other local politicians, got invited to all sorts of fundraisers and banquets and meetings and things like that, to the point where I had a state senator recommend I get on a school board locally because he said, you do a couple years on the school board with your military background. He goes, I'm telling you, we can get you to be a state representative here in about 4 years. And I go, it's really not for me. I'm just going to let you know right now. I have some skeletons in this closet. I wasn't always the greatest of humans.
Yeah.
I'm an open book. I'll share them with you. But
if you ever want to know what you did in your 20s, run for a political office. And,
so,
somebody will dig it up and tell you.
Yeah, I spent some young years living in South Jersey, spending some of those late nights in the Atlantic City area, having some good old times. I'm willing to tell you the stories, but you're also going to hear them from the opponents. So we'll just
I'll tell you this much: if your political career progresses, I'm a single issue voter, so I'm voting on this coming election. I'm voting solely based on getting that third weekend day.
Oh, there you go.
It's a 3-day weekend. So if you get into, if you get up to that type of platform, and you're offering a 3+ day weekend,
okay,
I'm voting for you, and I'm sure that 90% of Americans would agree with me there.
Yeah, I mean,
I don't have any stats to back that
platform would
up.
be,
But
I love America. I'm all for America. But the one thing the Europeans did get right is that, that 4-day work week. So let's really move into that avenue.
take a day off, America.
Yeah.
That's your
Tim 2020
campaign slogan.
Yeah.
Yep.
So yeah, I think we got something good going here, Matt. I look forward to doing more of these with guests and hearing all their stories, because not everybody's story is going to be the same. There will be that connective tissue through some of them, some similar things. But I think everybody's journey of how they ended up in the military, their status when they got out, where they kind of stood financially, where they stood with some sort of job prospects, is different for everybody. And there's different paths. You talked about guys
Right.
3 years out being VPs, managers, directors.
Yep.
Some people it's 25 years till they achieve those sort of levels of success.
Right.
But just kind of listening to all those stories. So before we get out of here, I just wanted to let you know, we do have the Facebook page. We do have the Twitter. You can follow us on Twitter at @beyond_wire. Obviously, we are on YouTube. Go over there, subscribe, follow us on all the platforms. We look forward to pushing more of these out. We will now be on all the podcast hosting platforms as well. Apple, Apple's the big one, but please go over there, subscribe, and review. The reviews give us a big boost. It'll help other people see us, get their eyes on us, and hopefully get to listen. So, Matt, you got any closing comments?
Nothing from here. Looking forward to this. Looking forward to this in the future.
All right. So with that being said, we are veterans beyond the wire. We look forward to doing more of these, and we'll see you next time.